the black men. But the
Hmm.
moment that his former case that he pled guilty to get a deal got talked about, now I need to hit you with a cease and desist. Now, motherfucker, you one of the biggest people who do this shit on a daily fucking
Hmm.
basis. So
Hmm.
yeah, man.
So it's what's interesting is we have this mentality that we have to attack other black men, and I think we're conditioned, like you said, because number one, no one else can. You know what I'm saying? No
Mm-hmm.
one else can actually go after black people the way black people can, and
This is a
the
fact.
ratings, the ratings, they it's we want to see the drama. Well, and everybody wants to see the drama, especially amongst black people. So it boosts the ratings, and you have these celebrities like Charlemagne and the rest of them who need ammunition or content to boost their ratings or to keep their ratings high, and that's why the drama is there. So unfortunately, they're the slaves. The way you dance for me, monkey, by attacking your people. That's what it comes down to. But yeah, Kwame Brown called it out, and I don't think he's getting recognition. I know it's blowing up, but he should be blowing up a little bit more than he is right now. And
Definitely.
I hope it gets to where it needs to be, where we start having these conversations because I love this man. I'm probably going to change my profile pic to Kwame Brown because I love this man. Everything,
Yeah.
oh my God, his delivery just so simple. And like you said, very country, and that's how they are. Like country music, it's very simple, very right to the fact. There's no bullshit behind it. It's just calling this shit out, man. But Becky was a good hit. And what did he say about Derek Fisher?
Man, listen. He said you tried that fake tough shit with Derek Fisher and you ended up still crying and with no girl. That shit sent me, bro. When he said that shit sent me like I was looking at it like this motherfucker gives no, but it's all
Oops.
facts. You can't argue with it. There's no argument for it.
Yeah, man. Respect, man. Respect. Yeah, you know I'm a Laker fan, so I hated him on the Lakers. I mean, I did love what we used to when we traded him and everything, but I love this man. Talk about a second life. So I'm here for it all.
There you have it. So let's get into the main topic in which we're here to talk about today. And
Yes, sir.
so this one is one that like I've seen this over the years. So I don't think you know this, but like I've been on Twitter technically for 10 years, but I've only really taken social media like actively being on there a lot since I started podcasting, which has been about 4 years at this point. And so this is a conversation that I see all the time that I choose not to insert myself in because I honestly feel that it's asinine, but I feel like at this point now, a conversation needs to be had about it rather than bashing, and that is dating outside your race and how that affects you being pro-black or not. And so there's this huge part of the black community that feels like just because you date outside and you're currently dating someone outside of your race, that it automatically negates your ability to be pro-black. Now, I adamantly disagree with that for several reasons. But before we get into that disagreement, how do you feel about that in that statement? What does it make you think? Where does your mind go?
um, so it's I'm conflicted because I see both viewpoints. I think the problem is how do we address it, right? And again, why is this a topic? The fact
Mm,
that being pro-black, the fact that we have to be pro-black. There really is no pro-white, but there's a reason why you have to be pro-black if you're black. You know what I mean?
yeah.
So, and we're going to discuss a little further going into the conversation, but there is no one answer to satisfy everybody. At the end of the day, it's like someone's going to have a viewpoint and they're not going to agree with you. Some people will, some people will be educated, but some people are still going to be biased. And I'll give you the perfect example. I remember when people had a problem when Kendrick was dating a lighter skinned woman because he's darker. And that was a problem for people. So someone's not going to be happy regardless. You know what I mean? Why aren't you with a black queen? Why aren't you? And then, why aren't you celebrating your culture either? So there's two ways of looking at it. And
Definitely.
it's just it's frustrating, but we're gonna get into it. I'm actually my significant other is Puerto Rican, so there's a lot of questions that come up, especially how pro-black I am.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we'll dig into that, and I'll go through the history of everything and how that worked out. But let's begin. Give
So
it to me?
this,
Come on.
this is where my mind goes. Like I understand that there is a community of black men and black women that when they date outside the race, they then talk down about the men or women from our race. those people, I understand where that you can say that they're not pro-black, because as a black man, if you are dating a white woman, a Hispanic woman, European, whatever it is, and you then decide to say, because I'm doing this, black women are beneath me. Okay, I can understand that part of not being able to be
Mm-hmm.
pro black. And I think like that image has been what's people have looked at as what somebody like people just think that if some as a black man or black woman, if you date, especially a white person, that you automatically think you're better than other black people, and you're dating a white woman or a white man because black men or black women aren't good enough for you. And I think now that that's projected universally
Mm.
on anyone who dates outside the race, and people don't really realize that that's what they're doing. I don't think it's always what's the word that I'm looking for? I can't fucking find it right now. But I don't think it's always meant as like, I think it's trauma in a way. I think it's so
Mm-hmm.
much trauma built around the fact that, why is a black woman not good enough for you? And you can
Got
easily
you.
say, even though I'm dating outside my race, if someone is, to say, I'm not saying black women aren't good enough for me. I just met the person that's for me. Black women are amazing. And then, like, you to piggyback off what you do, or what you said, is that we even see that within our race, because then if you date a light skinned black woman, oh, so dark skinned black women aren't good enough for you. It like, we don't see how that inner race racism is still projected on us from slave days. I completely feel that that's what it's done.
I
That
agree.
that's where that stemmed from. And I always say we have this genetic trauma that's just part of our DNA, until we identify it, it's going to be an issue. We tear ourselves down internally, but then want to say that we're trying to look out for our race. The definition of being pro-black means that you're pro black culture, everything, and even the people who don't understand black culture, you have to be stewards for them as well. So for you to say
Absolutely.
that, like, for you to shit on or whatever anyone else in your race, I'm sorry, then you can't say who's pro black or not, because by saying that, by bearing that flag of saying I'm pro black, that means that you have to be head and shoulders above and put the things that are for your race above any of your own personal prejudices. And a lot of people don't do that shit. But go ahead.
I agree. One of the things you brought up is those who date outside their race and they look down on our people. You're right. That's just who they're going to be, and they're not adding to the culture. But those that are in interracial relationships and they still teach and educate, you know, blackness and celebrate the culture itself, and also the person that they're with understands, relates, and still appreciates the culture. That's moving it forward. You know what I mean? You're
Yeah.
It's like a melting pot. You move in certain areas, like what the ghetto is technically, and you want a celebration of the people because you're going through something together. It's not poverty or anything like that, but you're in this community and you know each other. You go to the bodega, you go to the Jewish Jewish deli and everything like that, and everybody knows each other. That's what you want. You want to understand each other's culture. You want to grow together, but you
Yeah.
also recognize who you are, and that's what it should be. But like you said, when you get this person who goes to, happens to go to Harvard or whatever like that, and then here's another problem, and people talk about Patrick Mahomes, and most of these NFL players or sports people who date white women or just people that aren't in their race. There's two things here, and the way I see it is like this: these athletes are going to go to these unique colleges, especially if they're not HBCUs, because the status, right? The
Mm-hmm.
scholarships, the you're going to go to the next level. These schools, how many of them have black women? You know what I mean? Like, you're going to date, or especially if you're in these high schools where you're basically bred to be a football player, baseball player, you're in these elite schools, there's not a lot of black women there. You know what I mean? So you're always going to date people that you trust, that you grow up with, that you went to school with. That person
Yeah.
isn't there for your money. You're going to date whoever you're around. And it's not to say that black women can't get there, but black women didn't have these opportunities to go to schools like this. So I understand why they end up dating white women or dating, outside their race, because, and I'm not saying that they aren't there, but if you're going to grow up with your high school girlfriend and you get to the league, you trust that person because she was there when you weren't at that level. But I will say that there are people who do look to date white people, and there are people who come from other countries that are told, number one, don't date black. Whatever you do,
Yeah.
don't date black. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of different mentalities behind it, but that's a lot of that we have to address. So, and I'll give you an example for me. I didn't grow up in the social media era. You know what I mean? Like I'm right on that plane where there wasn't social media. There wasn't, reach out to somebody. You had to have a conversation. There was no FaceTime. It was like you had to be in front of somebody. You couldn't just type text or anything like that. You had to say what when you met a person. So I grew up in Paterson, New Jersey. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but if you've seen the movie Lean on Me, you'll get an idea of what Paterson was like. And I'll never forget, I brought a friend to Paterson, and I said, "This is school." I showed him the school I went to. He was like, "Is that a prison?" I was like, "No, that's my school, bro. John F. Kennedy High School." I'm like, "Oh, Paterson was rough." And when we grew up there, there was really no white people. There was a sprinkle of white people. So there was Hispanics, there were blacks, and everything like that. So, there were Indians. And that's who we grew up with. So when for me, I graduated college. I was one and only, I was the second person in my family to graduate college, number one. So when I graduated college, I started, my career. And the person that I was dating when I was at this particular company, again, we didn't have a lot of black people there. And I'm always at work. I'm a manager. And the person I'm seeing the most is, this Hispanic woman. And we had a lot in common and everything like that. But again, there was a lot of conversations that I had to have with her as well, because you assume, since we both grew up in Paterson, we kind of have the same mindset.
Yeah.
But you see that you don't understand what it's like to be black unless you're actually black. So when I used to make certain comments, like when I got called nigger, and I'm telling you, if I get pulled over, shit is real. And she's like, "Oh, it's not that bad." I'm like, "You don't get it." And those are kind of the conversations that we had to have, especially having kids. We still have, and now she understands it, because like, yo, your children are black. Like, yes, I do celebrate their Puerto Rican heritage, but what happened to George Floyd, like that could happen to our kids. You know what I'm saying? Like, you do have to recognize this is the shit we go through. And I'm not just preaching it, be pro-black. I'm always gonna, I love my culture. I love being black.
Yeah.
The trauma that comes with it too, unfortunately, but trying to educate and making sure that the person that you're with understands it. That's for me, that's still a struggle. Like, it's still, but there's growth there. So
yeah, and that goes to my point, is that this blindly saying that just because you date outside your race you can't be pro-black is ridiculous, because you're technically dating outside. And I know for some reason, like in black culture, we give Hispanics a pass. It's like we just accept them into our culture, but you are dating outside of your race.
Yes, absolutely.
And I don't know if anyone tried to dare say that you're not pro-black. I would challenge them on what their definition of pro-black is, because since I've met you, right, and we're less than a year of knowing each other, and two things that I learned about you: you fucking love music, and you are absolutely pro-black, and you are steward of what our culture means, and you are very proud of both the pain that we've suffered through our culture and the positivity and greatness that comes from that struggle that we've done collectively as a people. So like, it really frustrates me. And one of the things that, like, in my rant I highlighted in why you can't automatically eliminate somebody who's just dating outside of the race as being pro-black is because, as a culture, how many biracial people do we celebrate as being still part of our culture?
Absolutely.
So if you can accept a product of a biracial person into our culture, because I don't see nobody trekking Drake for saying nigga. Because to me, if you're saying that you can't be pro-black and be in a biracial relationship, but yet you're saying that these biracial people can say nigga, I need to see the outrage for that shit. And if I'm not seeing it, you can shut the fuck up with that opinion. Like I said, that doesn't take away from the people that do that, because they because they do date outside the race, they then look down upon the race. But we can't blanketly throw that on everyone. And we need to identify the people that do that, because we need to then educate on why the next group of people come up. And one of the biggest things that I can use to nail this whole point home is me. When people look at me, they see a black man. Mm-hmm. You feel me? Mm-hmm. No one can say, my whole fucking platform is built on the celebration of black culture. Mm-hmm. So if you dare try to tell me I'm not pro-black, and it's so funny when I always tell the story. There was this guy who was following me, and he followed my podcast. For a year, every time I dropped an episode, hey, this is a shining thing of black culture. You guys need to support this guy. He's a huge black culture activist. Black is beautiful. I mean, like, support one of the downest people for my platform, The Awakened Soul, for the longest, right? He had this
Mm-hmm.
tweet one day where it was like, if you have biracial children, I can't support you. And just because I didn't think he knew, I purposely tweeted a picture of me and my dad that day, right? My dad, a white man. And I just was like, I just want to see how, because this is the man who literally has hyped me up as being one of the biggest pillars of black culture that people should follow.
Wow.
When I say that I posted that picture of my white father, this man unfollowed me. You feel me? He I think he deleted some of the old posts promoting my thing, and it's like, why is it
Wow.
because of who my father is that takes away from the work that you've seen I've been doing and
Mm-hmm.
supported?
For our
So,
people.
and that's what I mean by, like, we have this inherent thing where we think that being pro-black means just like fuck everything else, and I get that to a degree. I understand that, like, we're in the 100th anniversary of the Tulsa massacre. I understand why being protective of our culture is so much, or is so important to so many people. But like I said before, is that being pro-black means being positive and representation of everyone who is black. And so, like, when you try to eliminate people just because of your own personal biases, or you feel like, oh, like, are you saying that? Like, have a conversation with that person. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
saying that there aren't people who do need to be called out for putting down their own women and own men in their culture because they feel like they leveled up outside of our race.
Mm-hmm.
Call that shit out. But you can't throw
Mm-hmm.
that on everyone blindly and then think that that means you're being pro-black, because at that point you're just being as big of a bigot as anyone else, in my opinion.
Yeah. Absolutely. That was some powerful shit, bro. That was some powerful shit. The ignorance, man. Seriously. So here's one thing I want to ask: is he being pro-black?
No.
Because he diminished what your accomplishment, what you did for the culture. So
Yeah.
you're not pro-black, bro.
You're
Like
not. You're
seriously.
pro your agenda. You're pro your agenda, and people are so caught up in thinking that their agenda is just what pro-black can be, and it's like, you don't realize, like I said, like, you're projecting your biases on our culture, and you're holding us back more than that, more than
Yeah.
helping
And
us.
what do you think of the white people and Hispanics who do want to have these conversations, that are at the marches, that do want to promote or push the culture forward? How do you, even though, and they recognize that, I'm not black, but they're
Mhm.
more allies for black. Um, what are your thoughts on I guess how they're perceived? Because I still see a lot of how black people attack them
Yeah.
when they're trying to help, and
Yeah.
make and the
Yeah.
guilt shame. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
they're the allies too. You can't have it both ways.
Exactly. And that's why I did set up an episode, and I hyped it. The schedule just kind of have worked out. But there is a woman who's a white black activist. She's white, but she is, like, literally here in Columbus. She organized so much pro black shit and rallies, and, like, is out there. And I wanted to have a conversation with her about, like, how does it feel being an ally, being supportive of a culture that you can never truly be a part of. And so I want to have that conversation with somebody. So if you, anyone who's watching this or listening to it after the fact, if you are someone who's outside of the race and you are truly pro-black and you do things to help the community, I would love to have that conversation with you. So hit me up. Everything you'll find the word to hit me up at. But the way that I look at it is this: is that as much as we have turned everything put against us into magic, like the music, the food,
Mm-hmm. The
everything.
food.
Black
Mm-hmm.
culture is in great, like, black culture is American culture, because
Is the backbone of America?
yeah, it's the
Absolutely.
black, yeah. But as much as that, as much as we have that, it's we seldom publicly speak about the fact that for us to get out of where we were, we absolutely had to have white allies to help. We didn't have a voice in law. We didn't have a voice in court proceedings. We didn't have a voice in how anything legal. So for to us to get to a point of having that, it had to be people, white people in power, who, and I get it, some of it did do it for their own personal reasons, and some did do it because they truly felt moved to help a community of people who had been enslaved for hundreds of
Yeah.
years. So
Yeah.
so but we have to acknowledge that, and that's not to say that we need white saviors or whatever, but you can't diminish the work that some of our white brethren have done to help us. Not that, I mean,
Absolutely.
we still had to do the footwork. We still had to forgive. We still had to be as strong as what we were to even make it to that point. But you can't ignore that. You can't ignore it. And I feel like so many people try to paint that away and forget that that is a part of where we were able to be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Without them sharing or using their platform, we'd be much. I mean, again, we'd be that angry black man or that angry.
Yeah.
Why are you fighting? What are you complaining about? You have equal pay, you have equal rights. No, we don't.
Yeah.
But you have these people like, look, no, they don't. Like, look at this. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
it's not equal. How many black people are killed? And I did like an episode a long time ago just as a test. It was called Black and Blue, where one of my closest friends is a police chief in a town over here. We grew up in Patterson together, and he's white Spanish, like white Tino, I guess if you call
Yeah.
him, right. Love my brother, right. So we had a conversation right after a lot of the shootings and everything. And I basically interviewed him, like, what is the procedure? How do you, profile? How do you deal with things like this? And he brought up a stat. He was like, do you realize there are a lot more Hispanics shot than, just as many Hispanics shot than black? And I was like, well, how many of them are dead? And he was like, that's a good question. You see what I'm
Mm.
saying? So there
Yeah.
is training to wound you, to suppress you. But when it comes to black people, you see what I'm saying? That's a whole different conversation. So
Yeah.
we still have the conversation as far as a black man and a cop who did identify, because like he grew up in Patterson, so he grew up in the hood, knowing how it is for all of us. But he was open to having this conversation as a law enforcer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
As law enforcement. And again, if those conversations happen more, we'd be in a much better position. And again, we're not saying like defund the police and everything. It's more police training, or just
Yeah.
knowing if this person is from Connecticut, grew up in Connecticut, watching black people like Training Day, and he comes to be stationed in Patterson, New Jersey, yeah,
Yeah.
he's on edge because I don't know what these niggas are gonna do.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of conversation to happen. But back to as far as yeah, we got to get past this. And I applaud you, especially because you never shy away from having a white father, and I love you celebrate that. A
Yeah.
lot of people, because and I know you had it hard being biracial, especially when people find out who your parents are. That's got to be hard, because I know people who have white fathers and black mothers. It growing up in Patterson. I remember the day one of them was dropped. My friend Atia was dropped off, and everybody saw her father, white father, and everybody looking like, holy shit, like. And I was like, that's what the fuck is up. You know what I'm saying? But
Yeah.
they kind of treat her different. Like, and they make these little jokes like, oh, Mr. Drummond is coming to pick you up, shit like that. Like, no. But she still is part of the culture. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
it's not like she denies her heritage, but she also recognized her father's white too, So I don't know. We just, again, I grew up in that era where social media wasn't as prevalent, and people couldn't be, these Twitter gangsters and everything was saying a
Yeah.
lot of shit behind the screen, but
Yeah. For
here we are,
sure.
man.
Yeah. I mean, I never shy away from it because, like, I'm very proud of like my black culture and my black heritage is something that nobody can say that I'm not proud of. And I think for me, like growing up in a home to where my father admitted, like, look, son, as a black man, I can't teach you. Like, I can't teach you certain things. I can teach you how to be a great man, but I can't teach you how to deal with the pressures of being a black man.
Mm.
That's why they sent me to go stay with my uncle and my grandmother every summer, because it was important to both of my parents to for me to get that. Like, and so because I've seen my father be someone who is very who basically told me, no, you are going to embrace who you are as a black man, and I want you to have the education because look, I can't teach you right, and if I try to raise you as something that people aren't going to see you as, that could be your life. You feel me? So
Mm.
he's like,
Mm.
I can't. Like, so no, your uncle is going to take you. You're gonna go spend 2 months every year with your uncle because he got some stuff that I can't possibly give you.
Mm.
And so seeing that very early on is like it's really, and it's so funny because when people say you can't be pro black and date outside your race, like I just look at my mother and if anyone who has met Patricia, my mother, Mama Hayes, as social media calls her, could never like my mom is one of those people who like my godmother is a Black Panther. My godmother is a former
Mm.
Black Panther from the fucking
Mm.
60s and 70s. Like that was
Mm.
when the shit was real. You feel me?
Mm.
So nobody can deny that. Like, and if I would challenge anyone to meet my mother, and because she was married to a white man for almost 30 years, to ever challenge her being pro-black, because I guarantee you, you will walk out of that conversation embarrassed, smacked, and your ancestors will probably feel it. So that's just the culture that I was in, and I've seen it, and I feel like we, like you said, it's a conversation that needs to happen, and very often we don't have the conversation and we rather rely on our biases because that conversation will expose some shit about ourselves that we don't necessarily want to face. And like I said, like to say that somebody's not pro-black because they're dating outside their race, yet you shitting on light-skinned people, motherfucker, you just as fucking bad as whatever you want to
Mm-hmm.
paint. You feel me? So
Mm-hmm.
shut that shit up to me. So
Absolutely. I think
yeah.
we should have Kwame Brown be the moderator for that exact conversation.
Listen, I used to
No,
always
seriously.
say my dream interview, as far as another podcaster or personality, would have been Charlemagne, and I not just because Kwame has been up against Charlemagne, but just because I would love to have a conversation with country ass Kwame Brown, and I guarantee you it'd be one of those ones that you like. This nigga just dropped some philosophical shit, but the way that he said, like, and that's why you gotta listen to people because, like,
Yeah,
some people you get turned off by their dialect or their country twang or whatever, and you'll miss. No, you just said some shit, fam. So
absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely. Well,
yeah.
I love you, dude.
I love you too, man. I love you too. I'm glad that we were able to have this conversation. Like I said, I couldn't, as soon as I was like, I'm going to have this topic, you were the first one to come in mind, man.
I
And
appreciate
I
that, man.
appreciate you taking time out your day to have this conversation with me. And any, I like to leave people in parting words, any parting words and knowledge that you want to drop or anything that you feel like we didn't talk about on this topic that you want to touch on before we go.
Um, so I would closing your eyes and listening to people, because if you hear something that's powerful and you don't know what color they are and it's moving the needle forward as a people, that's just as important. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
for me, and I have these conversations with a lot of people because I work at a science publication, and a lot of the stuff that I post or share is not just about being pro-black, but it's also about life. The things we know as far as climate change and the things we have to do, the things that we need to do for all of us, because at some point, if shit hits the fan, like we're all in the same boat. You know what I mean? Like
For
we
sure.
all have to figure it out. So no matter what color you are, but we got to start having these conversations now to build something for the future. And once we come together and unite and build these blocks, then we can focus on what's the real problems. You know what I mean? Aside from the currency and all this other shit that we're dealing with, but that's it. I would love for people to have a lot more conversations and to be honest with themselves too. Like, look, I'll admit sometimes I'm not right about certain things, but I'm willing to listen. I'm not
Yeah.
let my pride aside. I might have missed something, but I want to learn. I want to grow. I want to be more educated on it. Even when it comes to like promoting Black women, we got to stop trying to be heroes of Black women when we're not Black women. Listen, shut the fuck up and listen. Don't do it for them.
Oh my God.
Listen,
Yes.
just like with Draymond Green and with the WNBA, like his statement, like, come on, bro, let's be real. Like, check yourself first.
Yeah.
Educate. You of all people know, like he knows. And again, we got to get out of our own space, acting like we know everything, especially when we're not in those shoes. And again, stop blaming white people too. Yeah, there's some fucked up shit that happened, but we need to start looking at the people next to us as well.
Definitely. Definitely. There's a
So
lot of fucked up shit that happened, but you can't blame everything on that. And uh, at some point, right, we have to take ownership of our own future as a culture.
absolutely.
And we can't. You're not going to find peace by staying focused on. And I'm not ever saying forget. This is the person who's saying we need to remember the Tulsa massacre. So I'm never saying forget, but I'm saying we won't find the peace that we need and the progression by constantly focusing on what's happened in the past. Never forget it. Educate us. Never forget our history. Don't let us forget our history or whatever else. But it has to be new. We're building new ground. We're building new
Mm-hmm.
bridges. It has to be something new. And I'm going to end this on my last stating words. All you motherfucking podcasters, all you motherfucking YouTubers, you bloggers who want to be stewards of the culture and black culture means everything to you, and you motherfuckers didn't talk about the Tulsa Massacre, you motherfuckers don't even know about it, get the fuck out of here with that bullshit. And I know that's going to get some backlash, and I don't give a fuck, because at the end of the day, it's like, push merch that's Black Lives Matter. You'll push, but where did that all rooted from? The Tulsa Massacre, the purpose of it, the reason why it needs to be remembered is because that was one of the first shining examples of how prosperous black people can be working within their own and together and building their own community. And that was taken away from us, right? Wrongly. Ripped away from us. And they were waiting for a reason to rip it away from us. And they
Mm-hmm.
used a situation in which the narrative got painted a certain way, and they basically completed a legal massacre, but yet nobody in our culture is talking about it.
I remember one quote where someone says, "This nigger has a grand piano in his house. I don't have a grand piano." That was one white man basically complaining how prosperous these black people were doing, like how successful we are. That couldn't happen. That's unfathomable. So, yeah, and the fact that it had to be brought out by what was the movie, the show,
Watchmen. Watchmen, the
Watchmen.
TV
Like,
show.
think
Like
about that
you,
shit.
it was so crazy to me when
The
people are
first
like,
time.
when people are finding out, like, no, this is a real thing that actually happened, and people were fucking flabbergasted by it. Where the fuck have you been?
That shit got buried, man. Talk
And
about buried.
and that's not even to talk about what Central Park in New York originally was for black people, because that shit isn't taught in fucking history books
Nope.
either. But like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'm sorry, that's gonna get me on my
No,
horse. I'm
absolutely.
trying to stop, but like, it's real and it's deep.
Don't
And these
stop
are
it. Yeah.
this is the
That's
things
another
that it's like,
conversation. We're gonna say that
yeah.
for another conversation. But yeah, I got you.
And that's the things that it's like when people want to be like this big thing of our culture, and like, you don't even know our history. Like, shut the fuck. Like, there's so many people who think like they're educating our culture by talking about fucking dating and relationships. Fuck that shit. Fuck that shit. But that's just me. That's just me.
I feel you, brother.
But Marquis, tell them where they can find you, man. Let's get the fuck up out of here.
Impenetrable on IG and Marquis at Granband on Twitter.
There you go. You guys can follow me
And
at
you can
CEO.
definitely see me at the breaks.
Definitely the Breaks Radio, where we'll be talking about Exodus, the posthumous album from DMX coming up this week. I can't wait to talk about that album.
My God.
And then the shop with Jay-Z. We talked about it, and we said we didn't think it was going to be something deep. That motherfucker completely proved us wrong. So be on the lookout for the Breaks Radio. We got to eat a little crow on that one, but you guys can follow me at CEO Hayes, at CEO Haize. You can follow the podcast at Awaken Soul Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, theawakensoulpod@gmail.com. If you want to leave us a voicemail, you can do so at 614-547-2039. We are the #1 podcast for the culture, and we out this bitch.